Please note that central bank, it determines what is the interest rate in the economy. It is determined through a concept what we have is which is called as the discount rate. Okay, so what happens is the central bank, okay, it lends money to other banks. Okay, so whenever other banks they are in need of money, they will approach central bank and they would want to get money, right? Now if the central bank wants to reduce the money supply in the economy, what it would do is it would increase the interest rate, and it would say that it will require a higher interest rate for the money that it lends to these banks. Okay, naturally when the this interest rate becomes higher, these other banks they demand less of money, right? So what we say is when the interest rate becomes higher, the money supply decreases, right? So this is one way to control the money supply in the economy. Whenever central bank thinks that the supply of the money has increased, it would try to decrease the supply by increasing the interest rate, and this is what it is referred here as the discount rate. A higher discount rate would increase the cost of this commercial bank. As a result, supply would be decreased, right? So the interest rate policy tools available to the central bank is one is the discount rate. Then there is one more which is called as a open market operation. Please note that the interest rate etc are changed only a few times a year. Okay, so meeting of the central bank is set up with all the board members, and there they decide whether to increase the rate or decrease the rate. However, one of the very important tools which the central bank has is the open market operation. In an open market operation, what the central bank does is it buy or sell the bond in the open market. So the bond is bought or sold by the bank in the open market. Think about if you have the central bank and these there are like investors. Okay, so if the central bank sells the bond to the investor, it means that the investors are depositing the money with the central bank, right? So whenever the bond is sold, it means that the amount of money is sucked from the economy by the central bank. So what we say is when in the open market operation the bond are sold, it means that the money supply decreases. Okay, so the money supply decreases whenever they sell the bond in the market. However, contrast this when the central bank it buys the bond from the investor. So when it buys the bond from the investor, when you have bought the bond, that means you have to release the payments to them. So whenever a bond is bought, it means that money supply in the economy has increased, right? So this is the operation which the bank central bank does every day. So whenever it thinks that money supply has decreased and it would want to increase the money supply, it would buy the bond from the market, or if it want to decrease the money supply, it would sell the bond in the market. That is your open market operation. The third is the bank reserve requirement. Okay, now similar to your discount rates, what happens is like there are policy meeting. So there are policy meeting of the central bank, and so this in this policy meeting they decide on whether they have to increase the reserve or decrease the reserve. So first of all, we have to first understand what is this reserve. Okay, so if you know that Central Bank of India, it is called as Reserve Bank of India. So reserve and here reserve. The Central Bank of US is called as Federal Reserve. Okay, so wherever you see the central bank, there is a word reserve included. Okay, what is this reserve here for? Okay, please note that most of the banking system in the world, they work on a concept which is called as a fractional reserve system. Okay, so there is a fractional reserve system throughout the world. In a fractional reserve system, what happens is, okay, the bank, let's say a commercial bank XYZ, okay, if you go and deposit $100 in XYZ, okay, what will happen is a part of your deposit, let's say a 10% of your deposit, okay, which is $10, okay, XYZ the bank, so XYZ bank, it has to deposit with the central bank. Okay, so it has to deposit a part of the money that you have deposited, and the rest amount, the 90% amount, it can lend out to the normal public, so it can loan out, right? So since a fraction, so this 10% is a fraction, okay, has to be kept with the central bank. This $10 is actually a reserve, right? So the reserve that you keep with the central bank, so that is why it is called as a fractional reserve system. Only a fraction is kept as a reserve, okay, and that's why you have Reserve Bank of India or Federal Reserve, right? Now think about, okay, why this is a policy tool, okay? So suppose, let's say, the central bank want to decrease the money supply in the economy. So if it want to decrease the money supply in the economy, what it would do is, it will say that I will increase the reserve requirement. There is a slight increase in the reserve requirement, and it will say that instead of 10%, I would want 15% as the reserve, okay? So now think of the same XYZ bank, okay? So you were depositing $100, okay, and this $100, now it is bifurcated into 15 and 85. 15 will go as a reserve to the central bank, and 85 will go as a loan, okay? So what has happened is, earlier the loan amount was 90, now the loan amount is 85. So it means that there is a decrease in the money supply in the economy. So this is also one of the tools available, okay? And the last tool that is available with the bank, it is not a tool per se, but it is kind of persuasion that the bank would do to the commercial bank, and the central bankers will say to the commercial bank to decrease the lending or increase the lending, okay? So depending on the conditions that are there in the market.